Just a quick word about the Houston Preaching Mission. This series, this foundation, was established by Dr. Houston and his family many, many years ago, some 73 years ago, I think it was. And the purpose was to bring to our church and to our community noted voices within the Christian faith that could share the gospel and promote the Christian values that Dr. Houston and his family believed in and lived by and sought to encourage among all persons here at Central and in the Concord and Cabarrus County community. So just wanted you to know that that's a little bit of background about this series. And so a couple of times a year we invite persons to come. James Howell is here by really about the third invitation, because once he was invited to come and we had bad weather. Another time he was invited and set to come, and the COVID pandemic became apparent, and so we had to change our plans. So James, I'm delighted that finally you can be with us, and we now hear you gladly. Thank you.
Well, what fun to be with you. A beautiful place, beautiful music. Friends, it's great. When Tom was introducing me, I was reminded a while back, somebody was introducing me, and the last thing he said, and then I spoke right after that, he said, and he's the father of 3 wonderful children. And I said, well, this week it would be 2. Only 2 this week. And the Roy Williams thing is interesting. When I was doing field education, when I was studying for ministry, they sent me to Asheville, and they put me with a family who turned out to be Roy Williams' in-laws. Well, Roy Williams wasn't Roy Williams yet. He was just a high school coach. And that summer they offered him his first job in Chapel Hill. And Wanda, his wife, is great with the child, who's now Scott, who's a member of my church in Charlotte. And so Roy came by, just met him. He said, can you help me move? So we went and rented a U-Haul, and I, James Howell, moved Roy Williams to Chapel Hill. It's kind of my fault in some ways. I've always had an attachment to this church, by the way. Tom doesn't know this. My first parish out of school, when I was Susanna's age, I was out in the country up Highway 49 in Meisenheimer, and I was single and pretty lonely, and I would come into the hospital in Concord, and one time I stopped by this church for some reason. I met Garland Young, who was the minister, and if you can nod over that, you are really old, I just have to say. And Garland really welcomed me, and others on the staff, they treated me kind of like I belonged here, so I would hang out here when I would come. Steve James was here. We worked together at Myers Park for some time. Andy Langford's been a great friend, Carol Karkin as well. Tom, I know stories on Tom. I can share them with you later, much later. Let me read to you from Scripture. I chose these 2 passages to think about together. Genesis chapter 12, as Tom mentioned, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and by you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abraham went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed. And then from Ephesians chapter 4, I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all lowliness and meekness, with patience, forbearing one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of us all, who is above all and through all in all. Friends, this is the word of God for the people of God. I've been thinking about these passages. God calls Abram, and he doesn't tell him where they're going or how it's going to turn out. And you think if you're Abram and you have any sense, you'd ask a few more questions, like where are we going? What's the strategy? What's the budget? How's it all going to work out? Will it be safe? Jesus calls those fishermen, and they just drop their nets and traipse off after him. They should have asked a few questions about how it would go. God's call is always like that. You just go. You just go. You want to be near him. Ephesians says, lead a life worthy of the calling. In Ephesians, Paul does not say, thou shalt be nice. Be very nice. I want you to be nice. So often this kind of Christianity, like, oh, we're so nice. We're so nice. We're so nice. God asks us to have courage. God asks us to be bold. God asks us to take risks. I've been weighing what it means to be church lately. My church is building a building, so that's raised a lot of questions about church. Our denomination, have you been following this? Our denomination is a train wreck. Oh my goodness, so we're a mess. So I've been thinking of what does it mean to be church? What does it mean to be church? I've also read some things lately. There was this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that you may have heard of. He was a pastor in Germany. He dared to oppose Adolf Hitler, and they executed him for it. One of the things he said is that a lot of times in the church, we think that we're the people that we keep our hands clean. We're good. We keep our hands clean. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, following Jesus doesn't mean you keep your hands clean. You get your hands dirty. It's not about being clean. It's about getting your hands dirty to do things for God. I want to be part of a church that we want to get our hands dirty. I also read this thing recently, also out of World War II. There was a woman from Latvia named Mother Maria, and she went to France during World War II and was trying to rescue children, Jewish children, that were being persecuted and would be executed by the Nazis. And she saved many lives indeed. Here's an odd thing that she said. It would be a great lie to tell those who are searching, go to church, because there you will find peace. The opposite is true. The church tells those who are at peace and asleep, go to church, because there you will feel real anguish for your sin and the world's sins. There you will feel an insatiable hunger for Christ's truth. There, instead of being lukewarm, you'll be set on fire. Instead of being pacified, you'll become alarmed. Instead of learning the wisdom of this world, you will become fools for Christ. Fools for Christ. You learn the thing as a child. Here's the church. Here's the steeple. Open the door. Oops, that was wrong. No people. Not good. Here's the church. Here's the steeple. You open the door, and there are all the people. They're always wiggling around, and they're having a good time together, aren't they? The people, Susanna, you will learn this in the course of your ministry. By the time you're my age, you'll discover that the great gift of being a pastor is the people. We get to meet so many wonderful people. We see them at their noblest. We see them offering their lives for God. There's so many wonderful people, just people. That first church that I served up the road, their great story was that a few years before that, the church burned down one Saturday night. And they stood in the yard and wept over the loss of their beautiful church building. But then somebody that morning said, we're the church. We're the church. They rebuilt. They were a wonderful church. The people are always wonderful, and we need to remember that. It's not about the church building always. We had this little thing at our church, our young adults, this is right before COVID. They started having pub night. They would have pub night, and they would meet at various pubs around Charlotte, and they invited me to come one time. I think they wanted to see what would it be like if one of my parents came to pub night. So I went to pub night, and I sat down, and it was just an amazing evening. We're there, and a woman came in. She'd had a really hard day at work. Everybody hugged her and embraced her. Somebody else came. She had just been on a mission trip with some medical team from somewhere, and she had her iPad, and she showed photos from her medical trip, and everybody, oh, they were excited. Can we go next time? Oh, and so on. And all these things kept going on. And during this time, I was sitting there, and I knew the woman to my left, and I chatted with her, but the guy to my right, I'm famous for remembering names. I could not think of this dude's name, and I kept thinking, it's going to come to me. It's going to come to me. I rifled through the alphabet, could not come up with his name. Doggone it. And finally, I couldn't avoid it any longer, and I turned to him, and I just said, I am so sorry. I don't know your name. And he looked at me, and he said, well, I am so sorry. I don't know your name. What? So here's somebody, he's a regular at pub night, doing what church does, embracing people that are struggling, thinking about mission out in the world, and so on, and I didn't know his name. I had an urge to say, why don't you come to church? And I thought, he's already in church. he's already in church. So it's the people. People are wonderful. People make up the church. But the problem is, here's the church, here's the steeple, you open the door and you see all the people. You know how people are, that's when the trouble comes. Last Sunday, I preached on the first people, Adam and Eve. They sure made a mess of things, didn't they? Mark Twain rather humorously said, I don't know why Adam and Eve get so much credit. I could have done just as well as they did. Lancelot du Lac in Camelot sings, this could have been an anthem for this morning. He hears the call to come to King Arthur's table, and he's so confident. And part of his boast is he said, had I been made the partner of Eve, we'd be in Eden still. And about 10 minutes later, he's in bed with Guinevere, who's married to Arthur. And as I said last week, if you were driving on the road and you see a billboard and it mentions Adam and Eve, they are not inviting you to a Bible study. They laughed at my place when I told that. I have a friend who is a pastor. Often we're in some church meeting, one of these conferences, and he's across the room somewhere, and it's getting really tedious or really boring. And he'll text me a photo of the room. He'll take a photo of the room, and he'll text it to me. And I get it, and it has a caption. And his caption is, another unintended consequence of the resurrection. Jesus is raised, let's have a tedious meeting. Jesus is raised, let's be really boring. Jesus is raised, I just think about all the dumb stuff that church people do. Probably never at Central Concord has such a thing ever happened. But in the churches where I have been pastor, just dumb stuff happens. People squabble over crazy things. One of the biggest things is we forget what church is about. We get mistaken notions of what church is about. I have a lot of people in my church, they think that church is a club, and the club exists for the members of the club. There are benefits to being in the club. It's for us. Huge mistake, very different from when Jesus says, drop your nets and follow me, and they traipse off after him, and pretty soon they're including lepers and prostitutes and tax collectors, not the club that they would have signed up for. Another bad mistake that happens in church life, I don't know if you have folks like this in Concord. I have them in my church in Charlotte. I have people that, because of a lifetime in church, they have all the answers. Do you know people like this? None are here, I bet. They're probably coming at 11. We have people, they've got everything figured out. They know all the answers. And if you don't know all the answers, they're happy to inform you about all of the answers. And they think this is a life that is the fruit of being in church. When actually God calls us not to know all the answers, but to be forever curious, to be forever humble, to be forever asking questions of thinking, I don't have it all figured out as I age. I said this recently. I said, as I age, this was in class, and the guy in the room said, too late. Right. Smart aleck. As I age, I hope I am not somebody who says, I've got it all figured out. I hope I'm somebody who is forever curious. Church people are to be curious and humble. Another piece that comes out of that is a lot of people, and this is going on, I hope I can say this and get to preach again at 11, in the United Methodist Church. Part of what's going wrong, we're having a division, and the way I put it is there are a lot of Methodist churches right now who think that their job is to be the moral police of the world. It's their job to be the moral police. We will say what is right and wrong. And I just have to say, nobody out there in the world is listening to the church when the church tries to be the moral police. It's nothing but judgment. It's nothing but self-justification. They want to be the moral police. And when we do this, we merely mirror the political ideology of our society, which is the idolatry of our day. Nobody bows down to golden idols anymore, but we bow down to our political ideology. And I don't care who you are, if you're a conservative, if you're a liberal. We believe in our political ideology. If our candidate just wins, if our party just gets its way, then the kingdom of God will dawn. And this is a fool's errand. This is a fool's errand. We're not to mirror the divisions of society. I was meeting with a church the other day. They want to split off because we're right and the other guys are wrong. I said, you are a mirror of society, and therefore you have nothing to offer to a society that's confused and lost and sad. Instead, I have a couple of images for what I think church should be like. My wife and I were watching television fairly recently, a couple of months ago, and a program came on that we didn't intend to watch. She was watching something, and it just came on next, and we were just sitting there. And the show started, and it hooked me. And you can find it. You have to have Hulu, but you can get Hulu temporarily and then cancel it after you've seen the show. It is called Finding Harmony. There's this choral director. Choral directors are always the ones who are going to save the world. This choral director is named David Brown. He goes to Springfield, Ohio, and he's got all these flyers, and he starts nailing them up on phone poles and in store windows, and it says, come and sing with us Thursday at 7 o'clock. And everybody that he meets on the street, he buys a hamburger from somebody, come and sing with us Thursday at 7 o'clock. He hands these things out everywhere. Thursday at 7 o'clock, and lo and behold, all these people show up to sing who would never have spent 1 minute together. You got this guy, he's big and muscular, and he's bald-headed by choice, and he's tough, and he is a conservative, and he's one of those guys. There's a young woman there. She's confused about her gender identity. There are conservatives, and there are liberals, and there are black people, and there are white people, and there are married people, and there are old people, and there are young people. And all these people come together, and David Brown gets them singing together. And they're enjoying singing together. And then he says, oh, by the way, we're going to have the service project. We're going to go paint this house tomorrow. So the whole choir comes, and they're painting on the house. And he says, while you're painting, just tell each other about yourselves. So they start talking, and this big guy, he happens to be talking to the woman who's confused about her gender identity. And he tells his story, and she listens to him, and then she starts to tell her story. You can tell he's uncomfortable at first, but then he's like, I can listen to her. We were just singing together. And at the end of the story, this guy hugs this young woman, and all kinds of other people who would not normally like each other or be together are hugging each other. It occurs to me that what the church should do, instead of being the moral police, we shall pass judgment on those who are out there. Instead, what the church is called to be is we're the ones who say, come and sing with us. Come and sing with us. We will listen to your story. We will listen to your story, and we will share our story. Second image of church, I love this, as a friend of my wife's in Charlotte. She's my friend too, my wife and daughter, very close. This woman named Dorothy Count Scoggins. She's featured in the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. She was, in 1957, they decided under Supreme Court order to integrate the schools of Charlotte. They sent one person into Harding High School. Like, how stupid is that? Send one person. They sent Dot Scoggins into that school, and there were photos that the news people took, and the photos are people like ridiculing her and spitting on her and throwing rocks on her. Those photos are in that museum in Washington. Dot still lives in Charlotte. She's a terrific person. Great friend, worships with us often. Those photos, though, are interesting. They kind of went viral. They wound up in newspapers all over the world. There was a guy named James Baldwin who became one of the leaders of the civil rights movement. He saw that photo. See, what he had done, what James Baldwin had done, he was a black person that lived in America, and he was so tired of racial tension. He was so tired of being treated badly because of the color of his skin that he just got out of America. He went to Paris, and Paris is really cool if you've been there. And he's loving living in Paris. He's out of America. He has no troubles. He has a comfortable life there. But then he sees this photo of this teenage girl, and she is being mocked, and she is being spat upon. And he looked at that picture, and here's what he wrote in his journal. There was unutterable pride, tension, and anguish in that girl's face. It made me furious, filled me with both anger and pity, and it made me ashamed. One of us should have been there to stand with her. I dawdled in Europe for another year, held by my private life, but then I knew it was time for me to go home and pay my dues. What we're supposed to do in the church is stand with people. We find whoever it is out there that is disenfranchised, whoever it is out there that is lonely, whoever it is out there that is suffering. And instead of staying in Paris, we love to stay in Paris, our little comfort zone where we're just free of the troubles of the world. Instead of staying in Paris, we go and we stand. We say, come and sing with us, and come, we will stand with you. That's the kind of church that God calls us to be. And then last thing, I know I'm talking way too long. I can cut it down by 11 o'clock. Let me conclude with this. Lisa and I, 2 weeks ago, went to New York City, saw a couple shows, and we drove down to Princeton, where she has some ancestors buried there. She's interested in genealogy and such things. Anyway, I always plan out trips very, very carefully, and we were to the last day, and I had planned all these outdoor activities, and the weather forecast said it's going to rain all day long. And I was like, oh, I didn't have a rain plan. So we were at the bar the night before. Can I talk about being at a bar the night before? Is that like an okay thing? We were at the bar the night before, and I'm just saying to Lisa, oh, I'm sorry, honey, I didn't make a rain plan. What was so interesting is there were some people sitting next to us at the bar, and they said, you need to go to Robbinsville, New Jersey. What? You need to go to Robbinsville, New Jersey. Why? They said, America's best pizza is there, and there is a Hindu temple that is the most magnificent building I have ever seen. Now, I thought about church. What happens in church too often is somebody says, I didn't make a rain plan, or whatever. Our number one option is just to ignore them. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. They could have just kept their great place to go to themselves. Or the guy could have passed judgment on me, couldn't he? He could have said, dude, you should have made a rain plan. Why didn't you? Moral police. Instead, he said, there's this great pizza place, and there's this great Hindu temple. I didn't have a better plan, so I thought, okay, we drove to Robbinsville, New Jersey. We got the best pizza in America. And then we went to see the Hindu temple. And I have to tell you, I've been all over the world and have seen great spiritual buildings. This was the most magnificent spiritual building I have ever seen. And I found a building dedicated to God because somebody said, you got to see this. So let me just say, I think what God's asking of the church isn't, what kind of church do you want to be? It's not that interesting a question. What kind of church do I want to be a part of? I don't think that's that interesting a question. The question is, what kind of church is God asking us to be? I think the answer is we want to be the kind of church that we say to any and everybody, come and sing with us. We will listen to your story. We will stand with you. We'll be the kind of people with great enthusiasm who will always say, you got to see this. You got to see this. Our church, the Lord of our church, the life, joy. You got to see this. I've been thinking a lot about church. I want us to think a lot about church. It's a beautiful thing. Thanks be to God.